Hey guys, it's Tate. Welcome to another episode of BazaarU. Today I want to cover the Temple Expedition. So the Temple Expedition is an event that takes place on day 9 and it takes up the entire day. You're able to get to the temple if you get a Temple Expedition ticket, which I'll cover how to get soon. Once you're in the Temple Expedition, you embark on a series of events that are very powerful and they give you strong loot items and then eventually a very powerful relic if you're able to beat the last encounter. So the Temple Expedition ticket needs to be in your inventory by the time you get to day 9, and there are a couple of ways to get it. One of those is defeating a monster and having it drop the Temple Expedition ticket. So there are 10 monsters in the game that you can fight, and typically I do like to try to find these temple tickets, by fighting these monsters. I think it's like one of the biggest high rolls in the game. The temple itself is very, very powerful. You get a lot of economy, you get a lot of powerful items. So it's really worth targeting these fights. So we have the Warrior, the Eccentric Aetheryte, the Dabbling Apprentice, Street Gamer, Hellbilly, Prince Marianus, Noble Gorgon, Temple or Trashtown Mare, Foundation Weeper, and the Treasure Turtle. Now there's also a couple other ways to get these. There are events where you can get loot items, and rare occasions you can get the Temple Expedition from it. So, in the Abandoned Jungle, for example, if you pick the 3 loot items, every now and then you'll get a Temple Expedition ticket, which is awesome. All right, so let's take a look at what it looks like when you get to day 9. So when you get to day 9 with a Temple Expedition ticket in your stash, you'll see a new event here on the far right. Once you click it, you'll be presented with 3 options. There's a fiery door, a poison door, and an obsidian door. The door here affects the next fight that you do. So if you pick a fiery door, everything's going to be enchanted with fiery, poison would be poison, and obsidian, obsidian. So there are sort of theories where if you select the fire door, the loot you get throughout the temple would be more, likely to be a cinders, and the same with the poison likely being like, the poison plus up, and the obsidian being, sharpening stone. So since it's at worst random, I tend to pick the door that kind of associates with my build. So you can see in this example, I'm pretty burn heavy, so I did pick the fiery door, but it's not necessarily confirmed that that gives you a better chance of receiving fire items. So once you select the enchantment, you'll then be presented with 3 monster encounters. You'll have to fight these, preset quote unquote traps that are presented to you. The boulder is often the easiest. I find that, if you have any sort of slow, these 20-second boulders, they get slowed down. Typically, you have the damage to beat it. I've died to the blowguns and I've died to the caltrops, but I've never died to the boulder. It's worth noting that if you lose one of these encounters, you get kicked out of the temple. So that's a very, we want to avoid that as much as possible. So oftentimes I'm just selecting the boulder and beating it. So after you beat that encounter, you'll be able to enter the vault. Once you're in the vault, you get some loot options presented to you, and so you can kind of see here that. Or let me zoom in. I was not given any cinders, even though I selected the fiery door, but you do get a lot of gold regen and a bunch of benefits. All right, so then now you get to select a monster to fight. I'll go over what each of these monsters have and kind of which ones to select. It's worth noting the one on the right is way more powerful than the ones in the left and the middle. Um, as Vanessa, I often don't look at the right one. I never click it. Now that's probably different for other heroes, but since this is a Vanessa channel, my advice is to either select the Greenheart Guardian or the Frog. Now, once you beat one of those monsters, you can then enter the temple, which you'll get an option to choose between 3 different loot items. These are the biggest payoff for the temple, the Blazehowl Warden here in the middle being the best. However, I will cover each of the items that you can get from it, but it's worth noting you just get a random selection of 3 relics at the end of the temple. Once you finish, or once you select the relic, you'll then just go to your regular PvP encounter. So let's look at the frog. So the frog, you want to click when you have a potential chance to benefit from the skill. I don't think that these items are typically like, worth chasing. I rarely end up playing these in my board if I get them, but I will click on the frog when I want Siphon Shield. So this is your shield items have plus shield equal to 100% of the poison on your enemy. So if you're playing a poison build and you have some shielding, it's definitely worth considering clicking the frog. All right, and then the Greenheart Guardian, the poppy field is actually an item worth, targeting. So if you're playing a weapons build with a lot of fast weapons, the poppy field is a huge payoff item. So you can click this guy if you really want the poppy field, but you can also click them if you really want this skill, which is while you're shielded, your weapons cooldowns are reduced. So if you're playing a weapons build and you have some shielding, this would be a great skill to get. And then the poppy field is worth targeting. So this monster, I again never click because these items are not very good on Vanessa. There's not really many builds that work with these items. And the skill is when an enemy uses a weapon, charge a relic 1 second. There's not many relics that we want to charge, so we just kind of avoid this fight in general. All right, now let's take a look at what is possible to get from the rewards. So these three wardens are the Barb Spike Warden, the Blaze Howl Warden, and the Ice Watch Warden. The Barb Spike Warden effectively scales your poison items whenever you freeze, poison, or burn. The Blaze Howl Warden scales your burn items when you freeze, poison, or burn. And then the Ice Watch Warden freezes and it charges adjacent items. And then when you freeze, poison, or burn, it charges this. So in Vanessa builds, the Barb Spike Warden is, it's good, but it's not the best. The Blaze Howl Warden is definitely the best one, and it can easily turn your run into a free 10 win. And the Ice Watch Warden is very situational. I've played it. It's not that strong. You really need a lot of support for it, and it just doesn't. It's just not as powerful as these other two. The Blaze Howl Warden, you can just play with all burn items, and they'll scale so incredibly high. Incendiary rounds, dive weights, that kind of stuff. Weather Glass is good. Now the Barb Spike Warden, if you're playing a poison build, will be insanely good as well. Barb Spike Warden and a Weather Glass, for example, are also just two really good items to have together. So when I'm at the end of the temple, I'm always hoping that I get the Blaze Howl Warden. It just is such a strong item. All right, and then there's a couple other items that we can get. There's the Darkstone Focuser, Flame Coil Gem, and the this altar. The benefit of these mainly for us as Vanessa is that you sell them to get an enchant on your leftmost item. So the Obsidian enchant and the Fiery enchant are both, in my opinion, the best. The Obsidian enchant works really well if you're playing, like a slow build. So you can enchant like, Cauterizing Blade. That makes it really strong. The Fiery enchant is also insanely good. If you're trying to build towards a Oni Mask build, you can put the fire on your Corsina Crest. You can put the Fiery enchant on Dive Weights. You can put it on any of your burn items. It's powerful. And then the poison one is situational, but it's also pretty good. If you're playing Weather Glass, I mean that makes it even stronger. If you want to enable like a primordial build, it works there. So keep an eye out for these. This also is really good on the blowgun. All right, now there's these more situational ones. The worst case scenario is to see these three in the shop. These are like two of these and the Ice Watch Ward, and that's just kind of like an unfortunate reality. Now there are use cases for each of these. The Null Frost Altar being pretty good in a weapons-based build or an ammo-based build, because what it'll do is when you use an item, it'll try to freeze it, but everything's immune to freeze. And then when you freeze, your weapons gain damage and your shield gains shield. So pretty strong effectively to scale your weapons. The Darkstone Engine, it'll enchant other items with Obsidian. So, it's filler. It's not like really worth building around, but if you need to, you can take it. And then the Spirit Diffuser is really a combo item. At the start of the fight, you'll enchant a non-enchanted item on each player's board, and when an enemy uses an enchanted item, you charge an enchanted item of yours. So, it could work in a build where you, for example, maybe have like an enchanted boulder, and you want them to charge it for you, or you have, maybe an anchor that you want to cast a bunch. It's very, very situational, but if you can pull it off, it's a strong item. Alrighty, well that covers it today for the temple. Hope you guys learned a little bit, and yeah, good luck getting temple tickets.